I haven't eaten in days, whispered a thin, hollow-eyed voice from the corner of the rubble-strewn street. The village lay under a pale May sun, gray smoke curling from rooftops that had survived the bombings but now seemed abandoned, doors swinging on cracked hinges. Dust clung to every surface, coating broken bricks and remnants of furniture left where the families had fled or been forced to leave. A boy, no older than 12, knelt on the edge of the cobblestones, hands brushing through the dirt and pebbles, searching for anything that resembled food. His small frame trembled, not from cold, but from the weakness that had settled into his limbs after days without proper meals. Eyes the color of storm clouds scanned the street for a sign, a hint of relief, a shadow of help. Down the road, the hum of an American Jeep approached, tires crunching over shattered glass and debris. Sergeant William Carter, 25, leaned slightly from the driver's seat, the sun casting a glint off his helmet and the crease of his uniform sleeves, scanning the street. His gaze settled on the boy immediately. William's boots struck the ground as he stepped forward, the gravel and broken stones scattering beneath each careful step. The boy froze, pressing his fingers to the dust, clutching an empty tin that had been his container for scraps. William crouched slowly, pulling from his pack a small, pressed chocolate ration, the faint smell of oats and milk wafting upward. He opened the foil deliberately, breaking a piece, and placed it into the boy's hand without a word. The boy's lips parted, eyes widening, disbelief clouding the confusion that lingered from days of isolation. His small body leaned back, instinctively wary, and yet the chocolate was real, substantial, safe. William unwrapped another piece, lifted it to his mouth first, chewing slowly, showing by example that it was meant for him, the gesture patient and gentle. The boy's trembling eased, curiosity beginning to outweigh suspicion. William spoke in broken German, soft and measured. Du bist sicher. And the boy's gaze flicked up, tentative trust forming in the blue-gray depths of his eyes. The street felt impossibly wide and empty, yet in that small interaction, a bridge formed between devastation and hope. Dust motes floated in the sunlight around them as William guided the boy to a small wooden table set up nearby by other soldiers, trays of bread, boiled eggs, and steaming coffee waiting. The boy's hands shook as he lifted the food, the taste of warmth and nourishment igniting a reaction long absent from his frail body. Eyes closed briefly, savoring each bite, the sunlight catching on the dust and sweat, highlighting the sharp contrast between what he had known and what he now experienced. Around him, the quiet order of the American soldiers, the rhythmic movements of others receiving their meals, the low murmur of voices, all underscored a profound shift. Survival had been uncertain. Now it was immediate, tangible, human. William remained beside him, not imposing, simply watching, his presence a steady reassurance, the boy leaning forward, small fingers grasping at the food as if it were a lifeline. Every mouthful a silent affirmation that kindness existed even in the aftermath of chaos. The moment stretched, suspended between the echoes of war and the simple act of feeding a child, the reality of hope palpable, heavy in the air, and yet light with the promise of humanity, returning one small gesture at a time. The morning air hung thick with the scent of dust and damp wood, a lingering reminder of the weeks that had passed since the fighting had subsided. Hans Muller sat at the edge of the wooden table, fingers tracing the grain as he lifted another slice of bread, eyes fixed on Sergeant William Carter, who moved quietly among the small group of children and civilians gathered to receive breakfast. Each movement William made was deliberate, measured, and calm, a rhythm that contrasted sharply with the chaos the boy had known. Plates were passed carefully, hot coffee poured in tin cups, steam rising and curling in the sunlight filtering through the cracked windows. William spoke in soft German, simple phrases meant to reassure, pointing to the water jug and then to the bread, nodding as he demonstrated how to take just enough to feel satisfied without hoarding. Hans mimicked the gesture, the action awkward at first, his body stiff, muscles unused to proper nutrition, and yet the repetition brought a small sense of control he had not felt in weeks. Outside, the street was beginning to fill with the muted hum of activity. Other children tentatively stepped forward, encouraged by the quiet order, some clinging to siblings, some alone, eyes wide with cautious hope. William kept a steady gaze on the boy, observing the subtle shifts in posture, the slow uncoiling of tension around the shoulders, the way the fingers relaxed over the bread, as if sensing that the food was indeed real, available, and safe. He adjusted a small blanket around another child whose thin shoulders shivered in the morning chill, speaking a few words of comfort, never rushing, never forcing, allowing the children to acclimate at their own pace. Hans took another bite, slowly, deliberately, tasting the warmth, the texture, the weight of sustenance, and for the first time in days, the boy felt strength returning to his limbs, a clarity to his mind, a rhythm to his breath. William noticed the way Hans's eyes followed the steam rising from the tin cup, how they lingered on the other children, watching them interact, learning that survival could come with dignity, not just necessity. Outside, a few birds had returned, hopping between shattered fences and remnants of gardens, their quiet movements offering a subtle soundtrack to the scene, a counterpoint to the harsh memories that clung to the air like a residue. William gestured to a small crate of apples, green and firm, and Hans understood immediately, stepping forward with careful hands, lifting one, inspecting it, weighing it, and then taking a tentative bite, the sweetness a shock to his senses, a gentle awakening. Around them, the other children began to mirror these actions, cautious but curious, the first threads of community forming in the shared space, guided by quiet authority and patience. Hans looked up at William, eyes meeting his, and in that simple glance, a silent understanding passed between them. Safety, nourishment, and the possibility of normalcy existed here, even in the shadow of destruction. The sunlight shifted across the courtyard, warming the rubble-strewn walls, illuminating the dust particles suspended like tiny stars in the air, and William, moving to fetch another ration, paused to take in the sight, a small smile breaking across his face, the sense of purpose tangible in every breath. Hans, cheeks flushed with the heat and the richness of the food, adjusted the blanket around his shoulders, feeling the weight of hope settle in his chest, the quiet sense that he was not alone, that someone cared, and that each small action, the offering of bread, the pour of water, the patient guidance, was a stitch in a fragile but resilient fabric of humanity returning to a place that had known despair for far too long. Time seemed to stretch and contract with each bite, each gesture, each whispered reassurance. The rhythm of recovery slow but unmistakable, a narrative written not in words alone, but in movements, glances, and the simple acts of feeding and protecting, leaving the boy with a first, profound lesson. That compassion could endure even here, amid the ruins, and that even a small hand extended with food could change the course of a day, a life, and the understanding of what it meant to be human. Again, the afternoon sun shifted across the village, casting long, warm shadows over the cracked cobblestones and partially repaired walls. Hans Muller sat quietly on a low bench, the weight of a freshly filled belly settling in his small frame, a sense of relief washing over his limbs that had long been starved for sustenance. The courtyard buzzed with the careful movements of the soldiers as they distributed additional rations, carried water jugs, and arranged bread loaves for those still arriving. Sergeant William Carter moved with measured steps, his eyes scanning the area for anyone who needed guidance or reassurance, the subtle tilt of his helmet catching the sunlight in a manner that made his movements appear almost ceremonial, deliberate, and calm. Hans watched as William knelt beside a younger boy who had tripped on the uneven stones, steadying him with a firm but gentle hand, guiding him back to the line where other children waited, learning the rhythm of this new, orderly world. The air was scented with the warmth of baked bread, the faint metallic tang of dust, and the sun-soaked aroma of dry earth, and Hans inhaled deeply, the combination grounding him in the moment, anchoring him to a sense of safety that had been absent for so long. William spoke softly again in broken German, pointing to the crate of fresh apples, and then to a small basket of boiled eggs, his tone calm, deliberate, meant to instill understanding rather than command obedience. And Hans observed closely, mimicking each motion, his hands unsteady at first, then gradually finding steadiness as confidence took root. Other children began to follow the subtle cues, whispering to one another, taking turns, watching, learning, their small hands clasping apples, bread, and cups of water, their eyes wide, processing the rhythm of care. In contrast to the chaos that had defined their recent lives, Hans, cheeks still flushed from the meal, glanced up at William, the sunlight casting a golden hue across the boy's hair. And in that silent exchange, a thread of trust wove itself between the soldier and the child, a connection forged in the act of sharing food, in the quiet patience of measured gestures. The courtyard itself seemed to breathe with the rhythm of recovery, birds hopping along broken fences, their soft calls punctuating the stillness, a gentle counterpoint to the human activity below. Hans took another small bite of bread, savoring the texture, the warmth, the tangible sense of safety that came with nourishment, and for a brief moment, the sounds of footsteps, soft whispers, and the gentle clink of tin cups formed a symphony of ordinary life returning in a place marked by destruction. William moved to fetch another water jug, carefully pouring it for a group of children, his movements precise, ensuring each received their fair share without rush, the sunlight catching in the droplets as they fell into cups, reflecting like tiny prisms. Hans mirrored the action, passing water along to a smaller boy who hesitated, and in that simple act, the boy felt both competence and responsibility, a subtle reclaiming of agency in a world that had left so little room for control. The patterns of feeding continued, the simple, deliberate cadence of bread, fruit, water, and the quiet guidance of Sergeant Carter creating a sanctuary within the ruins, a space where trust, order, and hope could grow alongside the tangible needs of sustenance. Hans paused between bites, noticing the small cracks in the walls that framed tiny wildflowers, the way the light shifted across broken rooftops, and in that observation, a sense of permanence, however fragile, settled over him, intertwining with the security and nourishment he was beginning to feel. Each gesture of care, every patient demonstration by William, reinforced the understanding that the boy was seen, valued, and safe, a stark contrast to the days of hunger and uncertainty. And in that growing awareness, Hans felt the slow, steady pulse of possibility, a rhythm that suggested that life, even amid rubble and ruins, could carry warmth, kindness, and the quiet return of human dignity. The sun began its slow descent toward the horizon, painting the broken rooftops and scattered cobblestones in a deep, warm amber. Hans Muller sat quietly on the bench, the remnants of his meal spread neatly on a tin plate, hands lingering over the bread and apple as if measuring the security of nourishment in his grasp. Sergeant William Carter moved among the children with calm precision, carrying a small crate filled with more bread and fresh apples, setting each piece gently before a child while giving space for them to reach at their own pace. The courtyard, though scarred and uneven, had begun to take on a rhythm of life. The low hum of conversation, the soft clatter of tin cups, and the careful footsteps of children learning to navigate the space without fear formed a steady cadence that filled the air with a quiet pulse. Hans watched as William knelt beside a girl no older than 10, adjusting her posture to steady her hand while she lifted a slice of bread, whispering a few simple words in German to calm her nerves. The girl's lips parted in an almost imperceptible smile, and Hans felt a surge of connection, recognizing that these small gestures were as meaningful as the food itself. Beyond the immediate group, a few birds had returned to the shattered trees, hopping from branch to branch, their soft calls punctuating the warmth of the afternoon, and Hans felt a subtle comfort in their presence, a reminder that life continued even in places that had been ravaged. William moved to refill a water jug, pouring with deliberate care, droplets catching the sunlight like tiny, suspended diamonds as he handed cups to each child, guiding them without words to take only what they needed and to wait patiently for their turn. Hans mirrored the motions, passing cups to a younger boy, the rhythm of giving and receiving becoming a small ceremony of trust and understanding. The smell of warm bread mingled with the faint scent of earth and sun-baked dust, wrapping the courtyard in a sensory reassurance that comfort could exist here, that nourishment and safety were tangible and real. Hans took another bite, feeling the texture and warmth steady his body and his mind, allowing him to lift his gaze and observe the broader scene. The orderly distribution of food, the calm vigilance of William, the cautious curiosity of the other children as they interacted with one another and the soldiers. Each motion, each gesture reinforced the quiet lesson that care and attentiveness could reshape the world around them, that even amid broken walls and scattered debris, the human capacity for kindness persisted. The light shifted gradually, casting elongated shadows and illuminating the faint green shoots of plants that had begun to sprout in the cracks of the courtyard stones, and Hans, watching them, felt a fragile but persistent hope threading through his chest. William moved toward a small group of children who had not yet received their portions, speaking softly, guiding their hands, showing them how to approach the table, how to lift their plates, how to drink from the tin cups, the measured patience in his actions teaching without speaking. Hans observed, learning the quiet rules of trust, the cadence of safe movement, the importance of attention and care. The courtyard itself seemed to exhale with the rhythm of recovery, a subtle harmony forming from the combination of sunlight, movement, nourishment, and presence. Each small act, offering a slice of bread, pouring a cup of water, adjusting a posture, sharing a smile, wove a tapestry of reassurance and calm, a deliberate counterpoint to the fear and uncertainty that had defined Hans's days. As the sun dipped lower, casting a final glow across the courtyard, Hans felt a profound sense of being seen, of being protected, of being nourished not only in body but in spirit, a slow, steady pulse of human dignity settling over him, a quiet promise that even amidst ruins, compassion and care could endure and grow, shaping the rhythm of life and the contour of hope. The orange glow of the setting sun stretched across the ruined village, long shadows folding over the cracked cobblestones and the half-standing walls of homes that had once held families, the faint scent of baking bread still lingering in the air from the afternoon meal. Hans Muller, now sitting more upright on the wooden bench, held a small piece of bread in his hands, savoring each bite with a patience he had not known in weeks, eyes flicking to Sergeant William Carter as the soldier moved deliberately among the children and civilians, distributing the last of the apples and bread with the same quiet care and attentiveness that had marked every interaction since morning. The courtyard had settled into a rhythm, the soft murmur of voices blending with the occasional metallic clink of tin cups, the gentle shuffle of small feet over uneven stone, and the faint rustle of leaves in the partially restored garden plots, a slow symphony of recovery and subtle order that contrasted starkly with the chaos that had preceded it. William knelt beside a younger boy who had been hesitant to take a slice of bread, speaking softly in measured German, guiding his hand and demonstrating how to hold the plate steadily, the gesture patient and deliberate, showing that nourishment came with calm and security rather than haste or fear. Hans watched intently, absorbing the nuances of the movements, the rhythm of patience, and the weight of responsibility as he offered a small piece of his own bread to a younger child nearby, mimicking the careful actions he had observed, and in that simple repetition, he felt a fragile sense of competence, a thread of agency weaving through the uncertainty of his days. Around them, the sunlight shifted, warming the courtyard, highlighting the dust motes floating in lazy spirals in the air, each one catching the light like a tiny suspended star, and Hans, noticing the shimmer, felt a fleeting wonder, a delicate reminder that beauty could persist even among ruins. William moved to another cluster of children, adjusting the posture of a small girl who had stumbled slightly, his hands steady and reassuring, speaking softly in simple phrases, allowing the child to regain composure without rush or fear, the repetition of kindness forming a bridge between hesitation and trust. Hans glanced at the repaired walls and the scattered patches of wildflowers beginning to sprout through cracks in the stone, the subtle green a stark contrast to the gray and brown debris, and he felt a quiet lift of hope threading through his chest, steady and measured, reinforced by the calm vigilance and patient guidance of William. Each child who received a portion of food, each small correction or demonstration, each soft word spoken in German by the soldier, built a rhythm of recovery, a tapestry of order and trust laid carefully across the courtyard. Hans took another bite of bread, the warmth and texture grounding him further, and as he looked around, he observed the faces of the other children, the way they tentatively mirrored his own gestures, the slow formation of small patterns of trust and cooperation. William paused to look over the courtyard, the sun low and the sky casting a golden light that softened the edges of broken walls and scattered debris. And in that moment, Hans understood the quiet constancy of presence, the deliberate patience in each action, and the steady rhythm of care that made him feel not only fed but seen, not only safe but understood, the pulse of human dignity threading steadily through each measured gesture, each simple offering of bread or water, forming a foundation for hope that could endure even here, in the shadow of desolation, as day yielded slowly to the calm of evening. The sky deepened into shades of pink and violet as the sun dipped behind the remaining rooftops, casting elongated shadows that stretched across the cracked cobblestones. Hans Muller, now feeling the lingering warmth of the afternoon meal, sat with a quiet attentiveness, the tin cup of water in his hands cool against his fingertips, the last sips sliding down his throat with a comforting weight. Around him, the courtyard held a gentle rhythm. Children moving carefully in line to receive the remaining bread, small hands clutching pieces of fruit, the shuffle of bare feet over uneven stones, and the soft murmur of voices that had learned to speak in measured tones, echoing the calm example set by Sergeant William Carter. William moved slowly among the groups, checking plates, adjusting blankets around shoulders, ensuring that every child received their portion with patience and care. Each movement was deliberate, precise, infused with a quiet authority that spoke of understanding rather than command, teaching the children the subtle rules of trust and safety without a single raised voice. Hans watched him carefully, noting the patience in every gesture, the way William bent to meet the children at eye level, the gentle tilt of his hands as he guided the youngest to hold their bread securely. And in that observation, Hans felt a growing sense of competence and belonging. The air carried the faint scent of baking bread still lingering from earlier, mingling with the warmth of the sun on the stone and dust of the courtyard, creating an invisible blanket of comfort and reassurance. Birds hopped quietly along the broken fences, their soft chirping blending with the gentle movements of children as they offered each other pieces of apple, mimicking the careful generosity they had seen in William, and Hans felt a quiet thrill at the shared connection, the understanding that kindness could travel hand to hand. William spoke softly in broken German to a small group of children, guiding them through the motions of taking only what they needed, passing plates without haste, allowing patience to govern the pace. And Hans absorbed every nuance, mimicking the gestures with growing confidence, feeling a small pride in the mastery of these careful, deliberate actions. The sunlight shifted, gilding the dust motes in the air, turning them into tiny suspended sparks of gold, and Hans watched with fascination, the momentary wonder grounding him, giving him a sense of continuity and stability that had been absent for weeks. He noticed the subtle changes around him, a younger child learning to hand an apple to another, the smooth motion of tin cups being passed without spilling, the quiet, steady hum of coordination that William had fostered through calm presence alone. Hans's own small gestures mirrored the rhythm, offering food, handing water, adjusting blankets, each act reinforcing the steady pulse of recovery and trust that had begun to weave through the courtyard. The cracked walls of the buildings, patched where possible, reflected the deepening colors of the sunset, and the tiny wildflowers sprouting from stone cracks seemed to echo the fragile but persistent hope growing within Hans. William moved to the edge of the courtyard, pausing to observe the group, the subtle tilt of his helmet catching the final light of day, and Hans, looking up, felt the security and quiet reassurance of being seen, valued, and protected. Each breath, each movement, each careful act of guidance or shared morsel of food reinforced the growing understanding that even amid destruction, there was a space for order, trust, and human dignity. Hans took a slow bite of bread, letting the taste and warmth settle through his body, eyes roaming the courtyard, noticing the careful coordination of the other children, the steady hands of William, the soft glint of sunlight on tin cups, and in that small observation, he felt the rhythm of care embedding itself, the quiet constancy of compassion providing a scaffold upon which hope could build, a steady, invisible pulse that connected him, William, and the courtyard itself, forming a fragile, but undeniable web of trust, warmth, and enduring human kindness as the evening shadows stretched long and gentle across the ruins. The evening settled over the village like a quiet, protective blanket, the last rays of sunlight stretching across the fractured rooftops and the dusty cobblestones, casting the courtyard in a soft, amber glow. Hans Muller, cheeks flushed from the warmth of the day and the comfort of his meal, sat quietly on the wooden bench, his small hands wrapped around a tin cup of water, the cool liquid steadying him as he observed the steady movements of Sergeant William Carter among the other children. Each gesture William made was deliberate, careful, and measured, ensuring that each child received their portion of bread or fruit with patience and attention, guiding them through the rhythm of nourishment and care without a word raised in urgency. Hans noticed the subtle details, the tilt of William's hand as he adjusted a younger boy's grip on a slice of bread, the gentle nods he offered when a child lifted their eyes to meet his, the way his gaze swept the courtyard with vigilance, but never alarm, conveying a calm assurance that this space was safe, that they were seen and protected. The faint scent of warm bread mingled with the earthy aroma of the courtyard, the sunlight catching on the dust motes and making them shimmer like tiny, suspended stars. Hans took a slow, deliberate bite of his bread, feeling the warmth and substance steady his body, the act grounding him in a moment of security he had not known for days. Nearby, the younger children began to mirror the gestures of sharing and patience, passing pieces of apple and bread to one another, learning the rhythm of care that William had quietly established. Hans's eyes followed each motion, absorbing the lessons without needing words, the understanding growing that nourishment was not only for the body but for the sense of trust and safety he had long lacked. William moved to the edge of the courtyard, setting down a small tray of water and bread, kneeling to adjust the posture of a child who hesitated to step forward, his voice soft and measured, speaking in simple German phrases to encourage, guide, and reassure. Hans observed, imitating the calm confidence in William's motions, feeling a small but undeniable pride in his ability to participate, to help, to mirror the patience and care that had been offered to him. The light continued to shift, painting the walls and broken rooftops with deepening shades of gold and violet, illuminating the first wildflowers that had begun to emerge from cracks in the stone, delicate reminders of life persisting amidst destruction. Hans lifted his gaze to the sky, watching the colors blend and shift, feeling a quiet pulse of hope threading through his chest, steady and reassuring, reinforced by the constant presence and deliberate guidance of William. Each child's gesture, each careful motion of passing food or water, each soft word spoken in gentle tones reinforced the rhythm of recovery, a tapestry of trust and patience unfolding across the courtyard. Hans took another sip of water, eyes following the patterns of movement, noting how the children began to coordinate naturally, how the courtyard itself seemed to breathe with a quiet, harmonious cadence born of care, attention, and the steady presence of the soldier. The shadows lengthened, the lights softened, and Hans felt the weight of the day settle comfortably across his small frame, the pulse of nourishment, trust, and human kindness lingering, embedding itself deeply, a foundation for hope that could endure, delicate but resilient, in the quiet, amber glow of evening as the courtyard exhaled softly, the rhythm of care, dignity, and enduring compassion echoing in every measured movement around him. The evening deepened, the last strands of sunlight retreating behind the fractured rooftops, leaving the courtyard bathed in a gentle twilight that softened the edges of broken stones and shattered walls. Hans Muller remained seated on the wooden bench, his small hands wrapped around the tin cup of water, the coolness steadying him as he watched the rhythm of activity in the courtyard. Sergeant William Carter moved among the children with the same quiet deliberation he had maintained all day, distributing the remaining bread and apples with careful gestures, kneeling occasionally to adjust the posture of a child or to steady a hand as they grasped a cup. The courtyard, though scarred and uneven, had begun to pulse with life in subtle rhythms. The soft shuffle of small feet across cobblestones, the gentle murmur of voices speaking in measured tones, the delicate clink of tin cups, and the occasional rustle of the first spring leaves in broken garden plots. Hans observed every detail, from the tilt of William's hand as he guided a slice of bread to a younger child to the way the soldier's gaze swept the courtyard with calm assurance, silently signaling that this was a space of safety, trust, and care. Each movement reinforced the quiet lesson that nourishment extended beyond physical sustenance, shaping the atmosphere, the sense of security, and the rhythm of human interaction. Hans carefully lifted a slice of bread, savoring its warmth and texture, feeling it steady his body, and slowly passed a piece to a smaller child beside him, imitating the patient gestures he had watched all day. The child hesitated, glancing at Hans for confirmation, and Hans nodded subtly, the silent approval creating a chain of trust that threaded through the courtyard. The sunlight shifted, catching the dust motes floating in the air and turning them into tiny, suspended sparks of gold, and Hans felt a small thrill of wonder, an awareness that beauty persisted even amid ruins. William moved to a different group, adjusting a blanket around a younger child whose shoulders shivered, speaking softly in German, guiding them through the simple act of receiving and eating with care, demonstrating that patience, presence, and calm attentiveness were as nourishing as the food itself. Hans mirrored these actions, passing cups of water to a child who hesitated, feeling the subtle power of responsibility and the delicate rhythm of care. Around them, the courtyard exhaled quietly, each soft movement, each careful gesture, each small word spoken forming a tapestry of trust and reassurance. Hans glanced toward the sky, noticing the soft gradient from orange to violet, and in that observation, he felt a quiet pulse of hope threading through him, steady and gentle, reinforced by William's presence and the deliberate, unhurried pattern of acts that had transformed the courtyard into a sanctuary. Each child's action mirrored another, the rhythm of patience and shared care becoming tangible, visible, and audible, creating a delicate, unspoken order in the midst of past chaos. Hans took another bite of bread, closing his eyes briefly to savor the warmth, the sense of safety, and the profound simplicity of the moment, feeling a deep connection to the rhythm of giving and receiving, the cadence of protection and trust that William had cultivated with unwavering consistency. The shadows lengthened, stretching across the broken rooftops and stones, and Hans felt the pulse of human kindness embedding itself in the courtyard, a quiet yet resilient current of care that promised continuity, hope, and the enduring possibility of dignity even amid the remnants of destruction, forming a steady heartbeat of compassion that resonated in every measured gesture, every attentive motion, and every shared morsel of sustenance. The courtyard grew quiet as twilight settled over the shattered village, the last slivers of sunlight painting the broken rooftops in muted gold and violet, softening the edges of debris and the fractured cobblestones. Hans Muller sat on the wooden bench, the faint warmth of his meal still lingering in his stomach, the tin cup of water held firmly in his small hands, each sip reinforcing a sense of calm he had not known for days. Around him, the children moved with gentle care, following the rhythm established by Sergeant William Carter, who continued his deliberate patrol through the courtyard, distributing the final slices of bread and the remaining apples with patient attention. Each motion William made was precise, a balance of guidance and observation, kneeling to adjust a child's posture, tilting a cup to steady the flow of water, his voice soft and steady in simple German phrases that conveyed reassurance without command. Hans observed every nuance, from the way William's fingers lightly brushed the younger children's hands to guide them, to the tilt of his head when offering a nod of encouragement, the subtle cues teaching trust and care without overt direction. The courtyard itself seemed to breathe with the quiet rhythm of recovery, the shuffle of small feet across uneven stone, the soft murmur of voices, the occasional metallic clink of cups and plates, creating a measured cadence that wove through the ruins and offered structure amidst the remnants of chaos. Hans took another slow bite of bread, letting the warmth and texture fill him, and passed a small piece to a younger boy beside him, who hesitated briefly before taking it, the shared gesture reinforcing the unspoken lessons of generosity and trust. Outside, a soft breeze carried the scent of earth and the faint sweetness of crushed blossoms from wildflowers that had begun to sprout through cracks in the courtyard stones, tiny sparks of life amid the gray rubble. William moved among the children, adjusting blankets around their shoulders, guiding hesitant hands toward food, speaking in calm, measured tones, demonstrating patience through action, not words, and Hans mirrored these motions carefully, passing water, lifting bread, helping others receive their portions, each act reinforcing the rhythm of safety and nurture that had taken root. The light continued to fade, the shadows stretching long across the courtyard, deepening the contrast between the warm glow on the remaining walls and the cool darkness of the recesses between rubble piles. Hans's gaze lifted to the sky, observing the gradual blending of violet into deepening blue, a reflection of the calm settling within him, the pulse of trust and security resonating in every measured movement around him. Each gesture of William, each careful motion of giving and receiving food, each small word spoken in patient tones, strengthened the delicate web of order and confidence weaving through the courtyard, the children learning the rhythm of safety, the quiet of kindness, and the enduring structure of human care. Hans took another careful sip of water, the coolness steadying his small body, and watched as the other children began to coordinate naturally, passing pieces of bread and apple, guiding one another with subtle gestures. The quiet harmony of the courtyard a testament to the persistent power of care, attention, and deliberate compassion. The soft colors of twilight illuminated the dust motes suspended in the air, tiny particles catching the light like golden sparks, and Hans felt the weight of the day settle gently over him, a sense of being seen, protected, and nurtured embedding itself deeply in his chest. The courtyard exhaled with the rhythm of recovery, a slow and steady heartbeat of dignity and human kindness threading through every movement, every shared morsel, every attentive gesture, forming a quiet sanctuary of warmth and hope that persisted even amidst the ruin and silence of the evening. As Hans absorbed the lessons of care, patience, and trust, embedding them into his small, recovering body and mind. The evening deepened further, the sky turning a soft, muted indigo as the sun disappeared entirely behind the distant rooftops, leaving the courtyard bathed in a gentle, dim glow that softened the jagged edges of broken stones and scattered debris. Hans Muller sat upright on the wooden bench, tin cup in hand, feeling the coolness of the water steady him as he watched the courtyard come alive with the quiet rhythm of dusk. Sergeant William Carter moved with careful attention among the children, distributing the final portions of bread and apples, kneeling occasionally to adjust the smaller ones, tilting a cup or straightening a blanket, his movements precise and patient, each action reinforcing a sense of calm and security. The courtyard seemed to breathe in tandem with their movements, the soft murmur of voices, the shuffle of small feet over uneven cobblestones, the gentle clatter of tin cups and plates, and the faint rustle of the first leaves in the repaired garden patches created a subtle, harmonious cadence. Hans watched every gesture, from the tilt of William's hands as he guided a plate to a smaller child, to the careful way he nodded encouragement, the soldier's calm presence signaling that this space was safe and that they were seen, protected, and valued. Each slow, deliberate movement reminded Hans that nourishment extended beyond the body, shaping the atmosphere and the sense of trust and patience that threaded through the children. Hans took a bite of bread, savoring the warmth and texture, and passed a small piece to a younger boy beside him, who hesitated before taking it, reinforcing the quiet chain of trust and shared responsibility. The courtyard, though filled with remnants of destruction, had begun to hold a steady pulse of life. Birds hopping along the broken fences, soft calls punctuating the gentle movements of the children as they mirrored one another's gestures of care and attentiveness. William spoke softly in German to a small group, guiding them in the simple act of receiving and sharing, allowing them to move at their own pace, demonstrating patience, authority, and reassurance through action rather than words. Hans mirrored these gestures, passing water and bread, lifting blankets, helping others receive their portions, each motion reinforcing the rhythm of trust, safety, and human dignity. The subtle fading light reflected on the courtyard walls and the uneven stones, highlighting the small wildflowers that had taken root in the cracks, delicate symbols of persistence and growth. And Hans felt a gentle hope threading through his chest, steady and reassuring, bolstered by the deliberate presence of William. The children began to move more confidently, passing food to one another with careful coordination, creating a soft, silent harmony, the courtyard itself seeming to exhale with the rhythm of recovery. Hans took another slow sip of water, feeling the liquid steady his body and mind, watching the twilight colors deepen and blend, sensing the quiet pulse of care and compassion embedding itself into the fabric of the courtyard and his own small, recovering body. Each action, every gesture, every shared morsel of food reinforced the continuity of trust and safety, weaving an invisible but tangible web of kindness that stretched across the ruins, connecting the children and the soldiers in a slow, deliberate heartbeat of human dignity. The courtyard settled into a peaceful cadence, a sanctuary of quiet warmth and attentiveness that promised resilience, hope, and the enduring possibility of care even amidst the remnants of destruction. As Hans absorbed the lessons of trust, patience, and the subtle rhythm of human kindness, embedding them into the foundation of a fragile but growing sense of security and belonging. Night had fully settled over the village, the sky a deep indigo sprinkled with the first stars, and the courtyard was wrapped in the soft quiet of a world settling into calm. Hans Muller sat on the wooden bench, the tin cup of water in his hands now empty, the coolness lingering faintly on his fingertips, a gentle reminder of the day's care and nourishment. Sergeant William Carter moved slowly among the children one last time, distributing any remaining pieces of bread and apples, kneeling to adjust blankets and straighten clothing with careful precision, his actions deliberate and measured, a steady rhythm that reassured each child in the dim light. The children moved more confidently now, sharing small morsels, passing cups of water to one another, and imitating the patient gestures they had observed throughout the day, the courtyard alive with the quiet cadence of trust and attentiveness. Hans watched the scene unfold, noting the subtle exchanges between the children, the way they mirrored the guidance William had provided, and he felt a growing sense of connection, not just to the soldier, but to the rhythm and order that had been woven into the courtyard. The faint scent of bread still lingered in the air, mingling with the cool night breeze that carried the subtle fragrance of earth and wildflowers, tiny markers of resilience amid the ruins. William spoke softly in German to the children, his voice low and calm, guiding their hands, reinforcing the understanding of patience and care, demonstrating that trust was built slowly, through action and presence rather than words alone. Hans mirrored these gestures carefully, lifting plates, passing bread and water, adjusting blankets, each action reinforcing the rhythm of human kindness, the subtle but steady pulse of dignity threading through the evening. The soft light from the fading sun and the emerging stars illuminated the courtyard in alternating shadows and gentle highlights, casting a delicate glow on broken walls, scattered stones, and the small wildflowers that had taken root in the cracks, symbols of quiet perseverance. Hans took another small bite of bread, feeling the warmth and substance settle through his body, and looked across the courtyard at the other children, noting their careful, deliberate actions, the unspoken communication, the shared understanding of safety and care that had grown over the day. William paused to observe, his eyes sweeping the courtyard, noting the subtle progress in each child, the emerging confidence, the gentle coordination, and in that moment, Hans felt the reassurance of being seen, protected, and valued, a sense of continuity and stability settling into his chest. The courtyard exhaled softly with the rhythm of recovery, each gesture, each attentive motion, each shared morsel reinforcing the steady heartbeat of human compassion that had become tangible throughout the day. Hans looked to the night sky, the deepening stars reflecting faintly in his eyes, and felt a slow, enduring pulse of hope, the quiet promise that care, patience, and dignity could persist even amidst ruins, embedding themselves into the very fabric of the space and into his small, recovering body. Every measured motion, every soft word, every deliberate act of guidance and sharing of food had formed a sanctuary of calm, trust, and human warmth, a rhythm that would echo beyond this evening, leaving Hans with the subtle, profound lesson that even in the shadow of devastation, kindness endures, shaping the rhythm of life, the contours of hope, and the persistent, gentle pulse of human dignity.